Good evening and welcome to my channel. I have another story for you today. This is number 30, so we're really motoring on with these stories. As ever, it's based on 5 random words which will appear at the bottom of your screen. And this tale is called The Ice Moon. In the dark global sea of Europa, strange beings swam. Beings without eyes, beings so alien that Victor and his crew didn't even have approximate names for them. Europa Mission 4, the first manned trip to Jupiter's moon, contained 3 of the world's leading experts on this strange, inhospitable environment. They had little idea what to expect. All they had known prior to their 2062 mission had been given to them by 3 unmanned missions in 2022, 2038 and 2050. The first scarcely managed to drill through the icy surface of Europa, all 2.5 miles of it, before its sensors and hydrogen batteries failed. The second mission, utilising the borehole made by the first, managed to send back a few blurry images before it went offline as well. 2050's mission was powered by an ever-renewing antimatter drive. It caught a shimmer of something rare and strange passing by its lens in the eternal gloom, something with a whorl of teeth that had promptly swallowed the delicate camera. After that, all was silence and speculation. In 2058, the Jupiter Orbital Station came into being, making the possibility of a manned mission much more feasible. The 3 astronauts chosen had one thing in common: no families to speak of, and a willingness to undertake a 13-year round trip. Ludmila Zorovich was 25, Russian, former child prodigy, and widow of a hero from the 2028 revolution. She was the youngest female cosmonaut in history. Victor Ramirez, 45, was Cuban, but had worked for 2 decades with NASA, a driven exobiologist whose field had been entirely theoretical until Europa Mission 3's apparent swallowing. Completing the trio was Peter Mackenzie, a Scot who had trained with the Pan-European Space Agency, PASA, set up in 2031 to pool resources in time for a post-independence Scotland's re-entry into the EU. Mission 4's landing craft was partly blown off course by a magnetic storm, leading to an additional 11-mile journey to the borehole site. Their transport contained a second-gen antimatter drive, so the storm was merely a nuisance, albeit one that involved recalibrating their mission parameters. They would now have just 4 hours to explore the sub-ice ocean that lay in the darkness under the moon's ice shell. They found the borehole in one of the chaos regions where ice plates had collided, throwing up jagged spears of hardened methane. 2 such plates formed an ideal sheltered base to transition into the sausage, as it was colloquially called. This was a self-boring submersible, into which each of them had to be slotted lying down, one before the other, each breathing through aqualungs which would convert the highly mineralized sub-zero water into a breathable oxygen mix. As captain, Victor would take the helm and steer. Ludmila lay in the middle compartment, masterminding most of the mapping systems, and Peter would handle the biosensors and cameras from the rear. Encased in many layers of armour, the sausage was a grim and claustrophobic vehicle in which to explore, but entirely necessary, in an environment whose gravity, radiation and chemistry could kill a human within seconds. It quickly broke through the thin crust of ice that had capped the previous mission's borehole, and within 25 minutes plunged through the secondary cap at the borehole's base. The sausage dropped into the lightless European ocean, and they switched on their imaging systems. Lights in a place where light had never penetrated. After half an hour of witnessing nothing but slightly hazy, somewhat soupy water, which contained nothing more complex than microscopic plankton, miraculous and paradigm-changing though these microscopic life forms were, a shape flickered out of the gloom. It resembled a pair of stitched-together bagpipes with a dome-shaped head containing an array of mouths, each circular and filled with sharp teeth. Peter for one, was hugely overexcited, since this creature was clearly advanced, complex, and a carnivore. It was also around 50 feet long, and for a tense moment, the crew worried that they too might become its supper, an exotic, once-in-a-lifetime treat. However, the creature seemed to pause nearby, tickle them with its feelers, and shimmer on. Continuing down into the depths, the temperatures rose, and so did the frequency of life. There were invertebrate somethings like spinning glass hexagons, flashing darts that would resemble fish if they weren't constantly turning themselves inside out like plastic bags in the breeze. There were a lot of mouths and pseudopodia, but no eyes. Under Europe's ice blanket, sunlight never penetrated. At the bottom of the ocean, it was really hot, almost warm enough for a human to swim in, if that human could magically withstand immense pressure, breathing heavily acidic water, and undergoing the constant barrage of charged radioactive particles. Crab-like things scuttled away from them as they glided over a carpet of shimmering crystal-like forms, facets shining like brilliant mirrors, flinging the astronauts' glass-protected faces back at themselves. In those mirrors, each of them would tell the other later, during debriefing sessions, it was possible to see your own past, alternative present, and possible futures, because the crystals over which they moved were not mineral or vegetable. They were cells in the brain of the planetary consciousness of which the various creatures that surrounded them were appendages, extremities. It projected your possibilities back at yourself, a deeply unsettling experience, and one none of the three would ever forget. The Europa brain being had one question for each of them. The answer given was the same in all three cases. "Why have you come here?" Europa asked. "Because we were curious," Victor, Ludmilla, and Peter answered. "I have questions," Europa continued. Victor considered his options. "I'll bet you do," he thought, but spoke aloud only the standard question. "Who are you?" There was a moment's hesitation. The crystals within a mile radius seemed to vibrate in unison. Each traveller heard the answer in his or her mind, as they had the rest of the conversation. "Oh," said Europa, "I believe you've been calling me God." So there you have it. A very strange end to quite a strange story. Yeah, and I guess the reason why that story became so strange was that the word being, I chose to interpret that as a noun rather than a verb. And also combined with armour suggested, well, is there a being for which you need armour to face? And so that was either going to be something medieval or mythical or science fiction. And science fiction by far is my preferred genre of choice, or was certainly when I was a kid. Anyway, bit of background there. So thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please subscribe. Please tell people, share the story perhaps. And I will see you next time. Thanks for listening.